he says, well, come on over and do a demo for us, if you will. So I did, and it was all packaged up the way Drew does them now. Had the nice bag with the logo on the outside of it, and they were all stacked in, and it was a nice presentation. And so I showed up at the L.L. Bean office, the whole conference table of suits, and they slid that box from one to the next all the way around the table and looked at them. And Bob said to me, he said, will you do a demo for us? I said, sure. So we went out in the parking lot, and I climbed one of their telephone poles. And as I'm going up, I'm locking them on and stepping on.
This is a video I've been wanting to do for a long time. It's Jim Stepp right here, the inventor of the SteppLadder. Our main product, the birth of Wild Edge, came from the SteppLadder. I've known Jim since I was a 14-year-old kid. Been hunting with him since. We just got back from hunting this afternoon. Try to make it an annual thing. So I want to take some time and just have Jim explain the story and the life of the SteppLadder. You know, it came along and it came out when I was 1 year old. So
Right.
Take it away, Jim.
The first set that I made was in 1991. We were just talking about that a minute ago. So, and it was kind of the, you know, necessity is the mother of invention. I have an artificial leg and wanted to do some bow hunting and realized I wasn't going to get many deer if I stayed on the ground all the time. So, and I had a notion of combining like a chain binder. I said the simplest machine is a lever, and the strongest geometric figure is a triangle. So what evolved was a triangular step that cam locked against the tree, and it started out, I had two standoffs. My boy was helping me in the garage, and I tied them together with a piece of bar stock. But what we found was that when we cammed it on, it would cam on tight enough, but it was never secure against the tree because we always had one of the 4 points that wasn't touching the tree.
So the first one had 4 points.
Exactly. There was the two standoffs, but they weren't joined at the bottom. So my son was, I think he'd just gone into service, and he called me a week or so later, and he said, "Dad, did you figure it out?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I did. What I did was I just rolled the two bottom ones and put a pick on the bottom, so now it was a triangle, and when you cammed it over, that pick set in against the tree, and what it amounted to was that the cord basically just kept that against the tree, and your weight was transferred into the upright through that diagonal pick. It was kind of like having climbing spikes on your boots, and except that they weren't on your boots.
That's a good way to put it. I never thought of that.
You put them on the tree, and by accident, the idea that they all stacked together like that was I welded some up, and of course they're hot when you get done welding them, and I was throwing them on the floor, on the garage floor, and I kicked them kind of out of my way, and when I kicked them, they slid together like a set of lawn chairs. So that's when I realized, well, geez, you can take a whole stack of those, and they don't have to be loose. You can slide them right together. So it just kind of it was one of those things that I don't know. It just kind of happened. It wasn't, there wasn't any great amount of engineering involved or any of that. It just, I was playing around with making something that I thought would work for me, and so once I made a set and we realized how tightly they locked onto the tree, I started showing them off to my friends. Don Levitt's over here. I've been hunting with him forever, so he was my first guinea pig. And we've been coming. Donnie and I have been coming down here to Connecticut to hunt with Drew, and the way that came about, that was
almost 20 years.
Yeah, it was. I don't know when it was. Well, Don and I had been coming to Connecticut hunting for a lot of years, and we had a ball down here. But then Connecticut changed the rules, and they said, well, you can't hunt down here. You can't get a license unless you do the Connecticut safety course, and it was a 2-day thing. So we just quit coming. We didn't come for a bunch of years. And then I was on the computer one day, and I noticed that somebody was offering that course one day on a Sunday. So I called Don up. I said, hey, Don, we can go down and get that. And it was during the hunting season. So I said, if you're interested, let's throw our gear in and we'll go down and we'll get our license and we'll go do some hunting in Connecticut again. He said, great idea. So we piled all our stuff into the back of the truck, headed down here to take that course. Well, it was Drew's.
Well, no, you didn't have a truck. You had that van.
I did.
Remember the white van, and I used to sit in the back on a bucket.
That's exactly what I had. You're absolutely right, buddy. We had a Chevy Express van that we were using then. Yeah, and so we came down and took that course, and Drew's dad, Mark, was actually the guy that was given the course. So we did the whole thing, and at the end of it all, we had a bunch of those steps with us, and I said to everybody that was there, I said, if you're interested, we'll show you something that's a little different. And so we locked a couple of those steps on one of the posts, and Drew liked them, and his dad liked them, and it came time to get our certificate so we could get our license. And Mark said to us, well, no, it does. Because we wanted the certificate. We were going to go to Hartford and get our license, and we were going to hunt. And Mike says, no, that's not how it works. I take all the paperwork. I got to send it off someplace, and then and they process it, and then you can get your license. So he and I are bummed. We came all the way down here to do some hunting and can't. And so we start away, and while he was doing the course, Mark pulled out a whole stack of permission slips, private landowner permission slips. And he said he had a special spot in his vest where he kept those. And we got probably 10 miles up the road, and I said, Donnie, you don't suppose we could convince Mark to share some of those permission slips with us in exchange for some of these steps? So we went back to the course and asked Drew and his dad if they would be interested in having some of those steps and if they would help us get permission. Mark was all enthusiastic about it. So that was our introduction to the Walters, and it's been a friendship all these years. And now I'd been selling those. What happened, I made the first set in '91, and then it took, I think, probably about 4 years before I could get anybody to write an insurance policy on them. And I did a little trifold brochure, had it printed up at a print shop, and I would pass that around to, to sporting goods stores, that sort of thing. And I went to a 3D archery tournament that LL Bean was putting on, and as we were going around, Donnie and I had a good friend, Keith McDonald, was on our squad, or we were on his squad, and he knew people at LL Bean. I think he was working there at the time. And Bob Kravis, I think, was his name. He introduced us because they were on a different squad. Keith introduced us to him, and he's Jim Stepp. He's, you that guy with that ladder? And I said, yeah. He said, you want to come do a demo for us at Bean's? I said, I'd be glad to do a demo for you, but I can't sell them to you. He says, why not? I says, because I can't get insurance. Nobody will write an insurance policy on it. He says, well, come on over and do a demo for us, if you will. So I did, and it was all packaged up the way Drew does them now. Had the nice bag with the logo on the outside of it, and they were all stacked in, and it was a nice presentation. And so I showed up at the LL Bean office, the whole conference table of suits, and they slid that box from one to the next all the way around the table and looked at them. And Bob said to me, he said, will you do a demo for us? I said, sure. So we went out in the parking lot, and I climbed one of their telephone poles. And as I'm going up, I'm locking them on and stepping up, locking them on. and talking to them all the time. I mean, there's no effort to putting them on. I mean, once you learn how to do it, so I got clear to the top of that pole, and I said, for as easy as it is to put them on, it's even easier to take them off. I just unlocked them, put a little loop in it, and down it came. So he says, well, will you leave this set with us? I said, sure. And now I had been to Dunlop Insurance, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 times, and wouldn't even talk to me. But when I showed up at Dunlop Insurance with Bob Kravis from LL Bean, it was Mr. Stepp this and Mr. Stepp that.
Funny how that works.
Yeah. So anyway, that was kind of the beginning of it. The bad news was that I never did have a manufacturing facility of my own, so I had to find somebody that would make them for me. Same issues that Drew has now. And but I found a guy over in Vermont, and he did a wonderful job. He did a beautiful job of making them. And then I started selling. LL Bean was actually buying them by the pallet load. Kittery Trading Post was buying them. Jay's Sporting Goods out in Michigan was buying them. I did a lot of the shows. I did the ATA show. I did the Buckarama down in Georgia. Remember that one? Yep. But what I finally decided, it was a niche product. It was, Drew will tell you now, they'll sell like crazy at certain times of the year, but then other times it's pretty dry. And mine was a one-horse operation. It was all by myself. I did all the majority anyway of the packaging and invoicing and shipping and all of that.
And this was all in the 90s?
No, it started in the 90s. This SteppLadder was, I think it was 1998, was the best-selling climbing aid at the LL Bean Freeport store by a margin of 6 to 1. Wow. But the reason for it was because Keith McDonald and there were a bunch of guys over at LL Beans that knew me, and they knew how to put them on. And I had a display over there, so anybody came in looking for a way to get in the tree, they'd say, well, you got to come take a look at this. Yep. So, and you remember the first display I had, I think it was a 10-inch, maybe, have it. Yeah, a 10-inch piece of aluminum irrigation pipe that I wrapped with carpet.
Carpet had to be replaced.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, that was it.
After a couple trade shows.
Exactly. Well, I told him what I did was I took another piece of that same pipe, and I made some inserts. And then all you got to do is put the insert on and change the carpet on the insert once in a while, or change the insert. You're right, though. Going to the shows, it was kind of cool because I did a couple of different things. I don't know whether Drew has done it or not. Of course, you've seen his poster, I'm sure, where he's hanging with a four-wheeler. Well, that was done before. The original poster had me. I had my four-wheeler hanging, and my son's Army recruiting officer was the guy that took that picture.
Oh, really?
And it was funny because he says, how am I going to explain this to my superiors? Because he was sure that thing was going to break and I was going to die. But what was cool about that piece of irrigation tubing, when that step cammed over,
ding.
Exactly. It was like you struck that piece of pipe with a ball-peen hammer. It was that loud, and it always attracted attention at the trade shows. You guys would be walking down the aisle, and we'd cam one of those over, and it would hit that piece of pipe. Of course, you know what it was. It was a hollow pipe, so it would make that bong sound, and then I had some big boys. They'd come over and they'd say, well, can I step at it? I'd say, knock yourself out. I mean, there were guys that were pushing 300 pounds that would get on that bottom one and shift from one side to the other and say, man, oh man, how'd you get that tight?
But before they step on it, they laugh and say, no way. And
right.
They step on it and they go, oh my goodness.
Right. So, well, it's another little demo. Have you ever done the thing with the bathroom scale on the back side of the tree?
No.
You never have done that?
Oh, to see how much weight you're putting on the...
Well, that was the thing. See, what they were saying, how much force is there? And so I put one step on the back side of the pipe, and then I wrap the cord around the bathroom scale sitting vertically. And you watch it, the scale goes past 300 pounds as you're camming that over.
Keeps going.
So you're actually putting more pressure on that cord. People would say, well, is the cord strong enough? And so that was the little demo that said, well, you put more force on that cord when you cam it over than you do when you stand on it. I mean, so really that cord, all it does is hold it on the tree. So, and you know, early on we didn't know how long those cords would last or any of that, but I've got some around my house, down behind my house, that have grown into the tree.
Yeah.
He's done the same thing.
Yep. And so many people have tried to reinvent the wheel with different ways of attaching that same exact step to a tree.
Yeah.
And they're all great ideas. They all work, but nothing beats the original rope. That's why it's still around. That's why I'm still using it. There's nothing that we have found that can beat that.
Right. Well, see, it's so simple. I was telling you earlier today that you've got a competitor now that's selling them that's got a buckle. And the very first set that I made, I actually fastened them on a tree, and I used a cinch strap with the hooks on it. So it was the two hooks on either end of the rung, and cammed it over, and it was fine. There wasn't anything wrong with that, except that you didn't want to have a cinch strap for every step you had in the bag.
Right.
Well, the rope, there were a bunch of different things that I fooled with attaching the free end of the rope. It was going over the rung and then wrapping it around behind the tree, looping it over. I mean, somebody did a tree stand, and that's how they attached it. But then the loop, that we ended up with, the one that's on the back of the bag now, was I got to thinking about how a safety belt, how the part with the strain on it captures the free end, and it doesn't make any difference how hard you pull. It won't. It's always pinching it more than it's pulling it through, and so that was that simple. That simple. I mean, a lot of guys back when I was doing the trade shows would say, "How did you come up with that loop?" Well, it's basically the same thing that a safety belt does, and I liked it because it's just the simplest way of putting that on there. It's infinitely adjustable if you've got a rope long enough.
And the beauty of it, if you do it wrong, it's not easy to adjust. It really doesn't work. So if you do it the correct way, you know exactly that second you do it the right way, because you can adjust that free end.
Right. Well, and another thing that guys would do is, and in my early videos, I said don't capture the rope when you make your loop, because if you do, you tie a knot.
Right.
So you don't try to. Well, I think it's on a video someplace, but anyway, you leave it loose.
Well, that brought, so it was Kittery, Yellow Bean, J Sporting Goods, and then at what point did you call it quits? What year was that?
I decided I two things. Every time LL Bean or Kittery Trading Post wanted to buy some, they wanted to buy them for less. And every time I would put another order in over in Vermont, they'd want more money. They'd say, well, we can't afford to keep making them for. And so I finally reached that point where I said, well, it's a nice idea, and I think it would be worth doing, but I think I'm going to, and the thing that was killing me was those product liability insurance premiums. That was, those, you have a selling window of maybe 3 months of the year, but you've got insurance premiums you got to pay 12 months of the year.
Right.
And the second thing that killed me on that, all of those retailers insisted on being named as co-insured on my policy, and I'm the guy paying that premium. Finally made me decide it was time to lay off until I either got a good investor and could do the steps myself. Was the fellow that was making them for me said, well, I can outsource them. And I said, well, it's all right with me if you outsource them as long as the quality is the same as what you've been, because he was using my jigs. I made welding jigs for him. And he guaranteed me, he said, yeah, no, he said, they'll be the same. Well, I ordered a big order, And when it came, they weren't, it looked to me like nobody even used a jig. I mean, the rungs were cockeyed and the bends weren't consistent. They just were not up to snuff. And I was very discouraged when I got that, because I spent a lot of money on those. And I just decided, well, I guess I'm just not going to do it until I can do it all on my own. That machine, I told you, I designed a machine and spent quite a lot of money making that machine. You've got it now, but it needs the brains and the brawn. I call the brains and the brawn. And that would take some money. I knew it would take a fair investment to do that. So, but at least then you'd be doing them yourself. You've run into the same issues that I did back then.
Oh yeah.
With trying to have somebody else make them for you.
Because I swear, anybody you have making the steps, they don't look at it like I'm making, you know, a high-end piece of jewelry or something that has to be perfect. It's just slap it on a tree. Doesn't really matter. But when you have a product that you're paying good money for, and you look down when the steps are stacked, you don't want them all cockeyed, and then they don't understand when you put it on the tree, you want equal contact. So if they're bent and they're off by 1/8 of an inch, you're not going to have equal contact on the tree. So just the simple little things, and yeah, I ran into the same exact thing.
Right. Well, the one nice thing about it being triangular is you can get away with some irregularity, as you well know, because what happened was I ended up, when I quit, that order that I had sat in my basement. I've forgotten now how many pallets of those steps there were, but my basement was full of those. And that was from like 2004 to I think about 2012. And I had a friend that in 2012 asked me what I was going to do with all those steps in the basement. I said, I don't know. I'll probably end up selling them for scrap, you know. And he said, do you mind if I do something with them? And I said, no. So I gave him, I had VHS tapes. I had 3 different tapes. And I gave him those tapes with the understanding that he was going to make a tape of his own. My tapes didn't have anybody in a fall restraint system when they were using the steps. It was just a belt, you know, that went around the tree. And so I said, be sure that if you're going to make your own video, make sure that you insist on the fall restraint and all of that. And so he took those videos, and unbeknownst to me, instead of using them as a template to make his own, he posted my videos on YouTube. That was 2012.
That was David, right?
That was David.
Yeah.
And my home phone number was on those tapes. And my phone started ringing. And I was getting calls from literally around the globe. Guys would say to me, I don't care what I have to sign, I got to have a set of those steps. Over the next year, about maybe a little more than, I don't remember, when did you get the rest of that stuff I had up there?
That was 2015, I think.
Was it?
We started talking about it 2014. I remember I was with my dad somewhere, and you had mentioned, you said something, I was talking to you about I was sick of traveling. So I was traveling a lot for work, living in hotels all around the country.
Yeah.
And you said, well, remember, Drew, I got the steps, and you now have the power of the internet.
That was it.
Why don't you see what you can do?
That was it.
Clicked.
Yeah, that was it. See, what I didn't have when I quit, and I'm an old man, and I don't I'm not very tech savvy. I had no clue. When I quit selling the steps, it took about 10 minutes to download or upload a still photo on the internet. So, and what I knew would sell and what always sold the steps was having somebody demo them. LL Bean, the deal LL Bean made with me was, they said, we'll help you get your product liability insurance in exchange for the first 3 years of exclusive catalog sales. Well, that's a no-brainer, because space in LL Bean's catalog is pretty expensive real estate if you're buying it. So the problem was, and I think I showed it to you, but I know it's on the wall in my breezeway, the original ad in the LL Bean catalog.
Yep.
And it shows a guy standing on one of the steps, pair of boots, but that still photograph does not tell the tale. You know, it's everybody looked at that in their catalog and for sure said, well, that's just another damn rope-on step, and they suck.
Whereas like at the trade show, they walk up to it, if they've never seen it before, they don't know how it's attached to the tree. So is it lagged in? Is it screwed in? They're looking at, you cam it up, they go, oh my, holy shit.
Right, but see, when they put, see, it would have worked if technology had advanced to the point where LL Bean in their catalog had a .com that went to a video.
Right.
Well, then they'd have sold them. You know, it would have been a really good seller for them.
That video that David put on YouTube, that's got, I think it's over 1 million views.
See, and therein lies that is what lit the fire, so to speak, in the buying public. You know, guys, I've sold them to people in New Zealand. I sold them, literally, I shipped those things around the world. And I did not want to get back into making them, trying to have them made. I wanted to get rid of the inventory that was in my basement. But even after pretty much all of that was gone, people were still calling and wanting to have a set. And that's when I said, Drew, I don't know if you're interested or not.
Nope.
But you can direct market them now. You don't have to go through LL Bean. You don't have to go through Kittery Trading Post, any of those guys, because they'll beat you to death. So it was just the perfect thing to do the direct marketing thing. You know, do a couple of videos and show how it works, and guys will get turned on to that. They did, because just getting my old VHS tapes, you know, when David put those on YouTube, it just was amazing. It was amazing. So
Power of the internet.
yeah, I literally got rid of that whole inventory, with the exception of the few that you came and got. And so, and the way he and I said, I talked to my attorney. He said, because the original thing was I thought, well, maybe Drew would run it and I would have a percentage or something. And my attorney said, listen, if you don't need the money, just give it to him and let him have at it. So, and that's how we left it. I said, yeah, okay, it was fun. You know, I was able to go on some hunting trips and that sort of thing, and I had a lot of fun going to the trade shows. But it was a lot of work for one guy. I mean, it was me loading either my van. I had a van and I had a cargo trailer, and I would load that. I never came home with any steps when I went to a consumer show, because one guy saw how it worked, they wanted them.
Yep.
So, and now I will say this too, there is a learning curve. You've run into it already. Some guys can't walk and chew gum. So,
I'm going to use that one. That was perfect.
I'm just saying, it's, you know, I mean, I'd get guys on the phone. In fact, I had a friend out in Michigan that we ended up being friends. He called me and he says, I cannot figure this out. And he's standing in a sleet storm or something. He's out in miserable weather trying to put those on a telephone pole, and he's on the phone with me at the same time. And I said, listen, Max, his name was Max McPeak. I says, Max, listen, if you're having trouble with them, I'd very much rather just give you your money back. You send them back to me. And well, about 20 minutes later, the phone rings. It's Max again. He said, I got to be the dumbest son of a bitch that ever drew breath. So somehow or other, he managed to figure it out. And he's actually the guy that's responsible for me getting them into Jay's out in, you know, it was Jay. He did quite a job. He went around to the little shops that were out there in that area, you know, and so I sold quite a few sets of steps right through Max. I'd ship them to him, and he'd. Yep. So anyway.
There's a cool story. I've been using these steps since I was literally 14 years old, and used them every year. I used everything I get my hands on to climb a tree, but mainly steps. You just kept giving them to me. I still have the same steps I've had since then, and it was always just, I never thought, like, how cool is it one day now I'm selling them.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, I'm thrilled. I mean, it's nice to see that they're getting used. Number one, it's nice that my basement got emptied.
Well, those first couple pallets. So when we first started talking about it, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do this. I talked to my wife and I had no clue what I was doing. I still don't know what I'm doing, but I just know how to work really hard. So I put my head down and started the corporation, Wild Edge. Rented the shop from my father-in-law, put an addition on the shop. We were going to make the steps in-house. We had the machine. We got quotes on putting power to the machine. Still, I couldn't afford a coffee, so I didn't have very many places to go. Had the dream. He talked to anybody about it, and it was just like, what the fuck's this kid doing? What's he talking about? You're going to sell steps for a living? I said, well, that's the goal when you start a business, is to have a living. So I kept going at it, and then that inventory you had, I forget how many there were. I think there's like 2 pallets.
Oh, I have
Two or three.
yeah, I don't.
Whatever it was, I
remember.
had those steps, and you had done the consent form with customers over the phone.
Yeah.
So you're like, why don't you just sell what I have, and that'll be your little startup. So I did, and I think it was then I put an ad on social media, and within, I don't know, 4 days, I had every step sold. Guys calling, they would mail me a check. I'd email them the consent form, they'd sign it, send it back with a check. So I had the consent forms in a folder, I had the checks, I'd go to the bank, I was all excited. And then still didn't have the money to either put it into the machine or hire somebody or find a fabrication shop. I searched all over New England. I had people searching all over the country to make these steps. The prices were ridiculous. Just so happens my dad swung by the shop with one of his buddies, who's a very successful man, came from nothing, started his own businesses, and he came into the shop just to check it out. They were having a beer or whatever. And I told him, I was like, yeah, I just started selling what Jim gave me. He goes, how many did you sell? And I told him, I said, I did about 10 grand in, I don't know, 2-3 days. He's like, what? So then his head starts spinning. So then long story short, he's my first investor.
Yeah,
So that's how we got kick-started.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I'm tickled that you're doing okay with them. That's it. And here's the thing. I met a fellow insurance guy, Bob Kraft. In fact, when I first invented them, I actually drove to Michigan to show Bob Kraft. I don't even remember how I ended up getting his name. And when he realized that I was driving from Maine to show him this product, he told me later, he says he was so apprehensive. He was scared to death when I got out there and showed him that he was going to have to tell me it was no good.
Yeah.
That, good luck with that. But he was so impressed with that. He said he wanted me to come to, back then it was the AMO show, it's the ATA show now. He invited me to come to that next show because he wanted to go around with me to the various, that was the other thing that was a disappointment for me, because so many of the, Summit tree stands, the Wohlers. Old man Wohler says to me, he looked to his boys, he's got 3 boys that were working there with him, and he said, I sent you guys to college, and some guy from Maine comes up with something like this. So, and there was a ton of enthusiasm from different people, and so every time I'd come away from one of those shows, I was thinking, well, somebody, because I had both utility and design patents on them, that cost me quite a chunk back then, and I thought, well, so somebody is going to pick it up and go with it, but nobody ever did. I mean, there was a lot of lip service, but nobody ever came forward. And so my point, I guess, is that it's nice to know that at the end of it, number one, they're not any part of it.
Right.
And if people want a set of those steps, they can still get them.
Yeah, it's crazy. The amount of people I talk to that say, oh yeah, I have the original Jim Steps I bought 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Every trade show, which is what you mean.
Exactly. See, the way I have, the way
Well, first of all, it's called the SteppLadder, 2
Well,
P's, because that's your last name.
right.
And it
Right.
is a
And
ladder.
I got more flack at the trade shows because of that. They'd say, "What'd you do? Change your name?" Oh, yeah. The step ladder. They go, "Yeah, really?"
Hey,
Yeah.
everything happens for a reason.
Yeah. Well, I guess so. Yeah.
So when you got out of the service, what were you doing? Was that when you started logging, or were you
Well, no, actually,
fabricating first?
Well, I actually was doing quite a lot of fabrication work before I went in the service. I mean, I went out to the West Coast right out of high school. I loved it, Southern California, and that was it was special. That was a good place to be. Lots of sunshine, lots of bikinis. I was doing really well out there. I mean, I was only like, well, I went out there when I think I was 18. I think I just turned 18 when I went out there.
What made you go from Maine to California?
Well, my dad and I didn't see eye to eye for a lot of the high school years. He was very religious and I wasn't. so, yeah, we butted heads pretty well towards the end of it there. I said, I'm not dumb enough, stupid enough to leave home without my high school diploma, but I said, the day I get it, I'm gone.
So you packed your car and drove?
Yeah, well, no. I lived in my car that whole summer. That was 1964. So that whole summer, I had a 1940 Dodge two-door sedan. That was my. I slept in the back. I camped out by a pond. I was putting new roofing on the Pepperell Mill down in Biddeford. Nasty job. So every day I'd come back and jump in that pond, and that was
living like a hippie.
Hey, living like a hippie. That's just what I was doing. And then, so cold weather was coming, and my dad had a brother, my uncle, lived out in California, and that was out of the frying pan into the fire because he was a preacher. But he said he'd take me in for a little while, and so out to the West Coast I went, working in a mobile home factory. And my first job when I was out there was washing pots and pans in a restaurant. That was the pearl diver. The guy that was washing pots and pans, his job was he was the pearl diver. So, but what I do is I'd bus usually the lunch counter. I'd come out and bus it, and what I'd do is I'd ask anybody at the lunch counter if they knew of some job that might be suitable, a little better than washing pots and pans. So I met a fellow there at the counter, and he said, "Well," he says, "go to I think it was American Mobile Homes. It was at the Chino airfield, the World War II airfield. The fellow that does the hiring, his name is Gil. He says, go talk to Gil, and when he asks you what you can do, you tell him you can do anything." So I went and met Gil. He says, "What can you do?" I said, "Oh, I can do anything." He says, "Well," he says, "can you do sheet metal?" I said, "Sure, I can do sheet metal." So down at the end of the corridor, he says, right down at the very end, he's the guy by the name of Mike down there. He says, "You go down and tell Mike that you're the new hire." That guy's name was Mike Martin, and he and I have been friends ever since. He lives down in Kentucky now. But I went down, and the first thing out of my mouth, I said, "Mike, I don't know shit. I don't know the first thing about this." And he laughed. He says, "No problem," he says. But in no time, he and I could skin a coach. They were 72 feet long, and we could do 2 of them in a day. So we had it right down to a science. You know, you roll the panels in, put the screws to it. So, and then I went to Montclair Mobile Homes once we got to be really good at it. And I kind of sold Montclair Mobile Homes. I said, if you're interested, there's a pair of sheet metal guys that can put sheet metal on in a hurry. And I told him how much we wanted. And he said, "Oh, that's too much money." I said, "Well, you pay us that money, and if we're not worth it, you can let us go." So I got us a job at Montclair Mobile Homes. So we were, and what happened was the welding shop, everybody walked out at the welding shop. So same routine. The guy that was running the welding shop came up onto the line that Mike and I were working on. And he says, "Anybody here interested in working in the welding shop?" And so I volunteered us, and we ended up putting the ducting in, you know, so we were doing pretty well. We're making pretty good money, living in a brand new apartment, and I got my draft notice. So when I got the draft notice, I said to the post office guy, I says, "Can I give this back to you and you send it, return to sender?" He says, "No, it doesn't work that way." So I ended up getting drafted. So I had some choice of MOS.
How old were you when you enlisted?
Let me think now. I was, I think I was I was 19. Anyway, did the basic training, went to aircraft engine repair. That was at Fort Eustis, Virginia. Went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, the Hueys. We were working on the Hueys. And I decided I really liked those Hueys. And I thought I was going to fly them. The trouble, so I decided I was going to go to OCS, Officer Candidate School. So I applied, and I passed everything except you have to go before a review board. There's a bunch of officers you got to sit, and they interview you. And the problem was that two things had happened. One is I had a 1957 Plymouth with that experimental V8 in it with the two 4-barrels. So I had a whole stack of DRs, delinquency reports, from the MPs. But the thing that sunk me was I had gone on a 3-day pass, and my dad's family was from Pittsburgh. So from Fort Campbell, I drove up to Pittsburgh and stayed too long. So I came out of Pennsylvania and decided I'd better hustle. Well, this old Plymouth had a speedometer that read $1.50, and it was geared wicked high, but it would go. And it was a Sunday afternoon, probably 1:30 in the afternoon. Not a car on the road. I mean, I had it. It was just an open highway. So hammer down. I start rolling with that old 57 Plymouth, and I look up ahead and I see this Corvette. And as I'm approaching the Corvette, I see the black smoke come out of the tailpipes because he looked in his rearview mirror and saw me coming. He decided I wasn't going to pass him, but he didn't know I was already going crazy speed, and passed him. And 23 miles west of Zanesville, Ohio, I came over this little rise, and there was a Ohio State trooper out in the middle of the road waving a flashlight back and forth. So I went by him at about 80, but I was right hard on the brakes. Yeah. Anyway, they got me pulled over.
So that didn't help for OCS school?
It didn't help. That's what killed my chances, I think. I got escorted back to Zanesville, Ohio. What happened was I went under an overpass, and there were two Ohio State troopers sitting on an overpass when I went under it, and I didn't even see them. And so they started down off that overpass to chase me. Well, they caught the Corvette. That's the reason they were so late getting back to me. So the two that were out ahead got me stopped, and then after they got me out of the car, and we started talking. One of them says to me, he says, "Where are you going in such a hurry?" Because now they realized I hadn't robbed a bank or anything. I said, "I got to be back at Fort Campbell, Kentucky by 6 tonight." And one of them says to me, he says, "You're going to be just a little late." Well, they said they were clocking me with an airplane and a stopwatch.
No shit.
They had these little, I thought they were like survey marks or something. They were actually little airplanes they had painted in the road. He said the guy in the airplane did that 3 or 4 times because they couldn't believe that old car was going that fast. He says I was going approximately twice the speed limit. The speed limit was 70.
Holy shit.
So I was booking with that old Mopar. Yeah. So anyway, the officers, they said, "Well, you ship with your unit to Vietnam and then reapply in 6 months, and you'll be all set." Well, I didn't last the 6 months. I got over there and got caught in a booby trap. That was the end of my military career. Since then, I've been getting around on an artificial leg, so there's that part of it.
But that was the birth of the SteppLadder.
Right.
If you had both legs, you probably wouldn't have invented them.
Well, you're right. You're right. I'd have been getting up a tree some other way.
I want to hear a little bit of what it was like when you guys met my dad and maybe hunting with him for the first time, or maybe talking to landowners with him. There's got to be a story there.
Oh, I got plenty for him.
Well, that's true. I mean, that's when Don and I came down and did that class. Mark, his dad, was great. You know, he said, "Oh, absolutely, we can get you," and ironically, it's where we're hunting right now.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yep.
He said, "Yeah, we can get you permission to hunt." And then after that, he did a wonderful job. I mean, for a while there, he was head selectman for the town. So, and the town owned some property, and Donnie and I've had a wonderful time on some of those pieces of property. So, Yeah, it's
You guys have pretty much come down every year
well,
since then. Last couple of years have been on and off, but pretty much
yeah,
every year.
COVID kind
Yeah.
of did us in, and well, but when we first started coming down here, there was lots of deer.
Oh yeah.
But my friend Drew killed so many of them. Drew and his friends kind of decimated the herd.
Pretty liberal season.
Yeah, he kind of. Donnie and I kept telling him, and it's funny. I don't remember which one is it.
Oh,
Drew
right in
was
the middle.
was the first one.
Right in the middle.
Yeah, he was only like 15, I think.
Yep.
And he said he just jumped up on a big rock someplace, and that thing came down through the woods. Donnie and I saw that deer, and we said to him, he said, well, you better appreciate that, because he and I have been hunting for our whole lives and haven't had a chance at anything like that. We said that'll be like once in a lifetime. Well,
I said the fuck it will.
well, yeah. Well, he knew something we didn't, because about every year actually, I get pictures that Drew sends me. He's got another great big old wall hanger laying on the ground. Now Lydia's doing the same thing. Donnie and I are waiting for our first one still.
Yeah.
Drew, what was it like when Jim approached you for the first time and kind of brought up the whole concept of taking over the SteppLadder?
It's like I remember it. I remember us talking over the phone, and then you started sending me a couple emails. Then I was up there for a drill in Maine or Dead, and I came up, or we were at your house, and you showed me the whole entire box of receipts when you sold with the waivers.
Right.
Showed me everything, the history, and because I've been using it for so long, but I never really paid attention to really what was going on and how much you did. And then that's when you offered, hey, see if you can bring these back to life with the power of the internet and sell them. So like I said before, I didn't know what in the world I was doing, but we started the company, and I mean, yeah, my first thoughts were obviously every day, how in the world am I going to make this work? I'd be beating my head against the desk and trying to figure it out. And with most product businesses, it's just volume, and keeping up with the volume, and it was a lot. But you and I spent the first year and a half trying to get the machine going. We're getting quotes that were just out of this world to get. We had the basic machine, we just needed the power. So Jim and I talked all the time. Jim helped me start the business, did everything with me, and then really it didn't take off till we're doing the Mind Hack by, was it David Bayer, that my investor gave me, this super expensive program that he gave us to use for free. And it was all like some meditation stuff, and I was like, I'm just going to give this a whirl. What do I got to lose? And then he starts like, picture your life in 5 years, picture your life in 10 years, and whatever you picture, write that down, make it, or a mental picture. So I pictured this big, giant, awesome, badass shop with a beautiful house next to it, and taking my kids down to the bus stop. I'm like, that's the freaking life I want. I want freedom. I don't want to work for somebody. I don't want to be inside. I just got to be doing something, making something. And that's when, at the end of that, he was like, now, find your niche. Whatever you think your niche is, focus on that. You could sell to everybody in every broad spectrum, like I was selling steps to guys to climb coconut trees to pick the coconuts so they don't fall on their kid and kill their kid.
Right.
I had guys doing Malaysia I sent steps to. They bought a ton for studying birds up in trees. Chaga mushrooms grow up high in trees, so you got to have a portable system to climb chaga tree houses for kids. Like, I was all over, but then when he said focus on the niche, I was like, boom, saddle hunting, mobile hunting. How much more mobile can you get than a little tiny set of steps that you can get screaming high with? And then came the saddles, and mobile hunting was the real kickstart to Wild Edge. But everything that we sell, our core main products still, no matter what I come out with a new product, the main product is a SteppLadder. And now the steps incorporate into every product. Like the way I climb and most people climb with our products, that step is like the core. So it's my climbing method, it's my platform, it's my handhold, it's my gear hanger, it's my bow hanger, it's my absolute everything. And like, they're just so versatile. Today, Jim's Millennium stand, his leg isn't feeling good, so he got off the ground tonight. He had the Millennium seat that folds out, straps to the tree. Well, the tree was too big for the strap, which is typical. So I had a set of steps in a tree 20 yards away. I ran, grabbed a step, put it around that seat, snapped the step behind the tree, and the tree was now secured. Seat was secured to the tree. just simple, versatile stuff like that. Every time I'm climbing, say I forget my bow hanger, well, I can figure out a way to hang something from the back of a step. I forget this, I can figure something out with that step. I forgot the base of my camera arm once, so all I did was put the rope step through the bracket of the freaking L of the camera arm, snapped it to the tree, and it worked just fine. It's just, they're so versatile, and I don't know if I answered your question or not, but yeah, like, who's this crazy Mainer with this idea?
What was it like? So you were what, 25, 24?
Well, it was in
2015, 14?
2014, I was 24. Started the business in 2015. We met with lawyers, trying to figure out the business and this and that, and all the lawyers just drove us absolutely nuts. So that's when Jim said, you know what, just get started. You don't owe me anything. Just take care of me when you can. That was our, it's been like a father to me ever since we met. It was pretty cool how it all evolved into a family friendship, into life, business. Still climbing trees today.
Yeah, well, if Donnie and I totaled up the number of trees that we've climbed with these things, it's been a few. I mean, let's see, 1991. That's a ways back.
Before my time.
That's a ways back. Yep, before your time, right?
That's right.
Just right. Well,
You must be pretty happy where the business is now, huh? I mean, what it's come to?
well, I am. I mean, it's just one of those things that, yeah, it would have been a disappointment. That friend it's funny because all he did was post my videos on YouTube. He didn't, I mean, and I asked him, I said, why? He said, well, because I wanted to see if there was any demand still. Well, so theoretically, one would have thought that if he was that enthusiastic about it, he's not a hunter. I mean, he's not, one would have thought that he would have said, okay, yeah, I'm interested and I don't want to do something with it. So the whole idea of all of that inventory getting sold was still on me. You know what I mean? It was still a one-horse operation for all of that. So I was taking the orders, but I was going to say, I told Drew, I said, I didn't even want to take credit cards. I said, if you want a set of these steps, it's either going to be a bank check or a money order, and you're going to have to sign the waiver ahead of time. When there was that much interest, I went to my attorney and I said, well, I don't want to go try to buy product liability insurance like I was paying for before. And my attorney said, well, do a waiver, the same kind of a waiver you'd do if you were going to skydive. Say hunting from a tree stand is a dangerous thing to do. Our recommendation is don't do it, but if you're going to do it, then make sure that you got a fall restraint system and all of those things. Make that as bulletproof as you can. And so that's what he did. He drew up a liability waiver for me, and that's what everybody had to sign. Now, we were talking about it earlier. These steps have been around a long time, and I don't know, I'm going to guess that somebody at some point has slipped off one or something, but there has never been a claim. For all the time I was selling them, there was never a liability claim. I mean, it's a very safe, of all steps, it's very safe, even if you slip.
Well, how many horror stories did you hear at shows or talking to guys? No matter what trade show you go to, there's somebody will approach you and tell you a horror story about how they fell out of a tree, they were using screw-in steps, they got gutted on the way down, hooked, or they were in a climber, they bottom slipped out, they bear hugged a tree.
Yeah, that's
just
right.
horror stories. And yeah, I have had people tell me, yeah, I slipped off the steps, but I didn't go anywhere because I was attached to the tree and they're round and nothing happened.
Exactly. See, you might skin your shin a little bit, but you're not going to disembowel yourself.
Exactly.
So,
See, what I love about Wild Edge is we're still a veteran-owned and operated, family-run business. It's myself, my wife, my sister, and my mother-in-law. And, we got one part-time employee that comes in after school, high school kid. We're nothing big. I'm competing against the companies that have 40 employees and a 500,000 square foot warehouse. And, those are my main competitors, but we're staying true to our colors of we're serious hunters that design serious, durable equipment that's going to last. I can't tell you how many products I've gone through, and I'm like, you're making hunting clothes. It's something like hunting clothes. Well, why don't you make them like Carhartts? If you're really hunting, you're really using your gear, you're going to be beating it up. So I'd say that's always been my main focus of, not just quality and appearance, but actual structure of how everything's made. And that's why we beat the hell out of the products. And I want a product that, like, I've been using the same step since I was 14. Like, why should I have to replace a piece of metal? It should last. And just being real. I mean, everything you see on social media is done by this guy right here or Lydia. I mean, we don't have media marketing companies running around blasting our names. I don't pay anybody to use my products. I don't have Levi Morgan using my products because I'm not going to pay Levi Morgan. If I could afford them, I don't know. I just don't want to be like that. I want people to use my products because they believe in them, and those are our customers. And I got customers that are the same customers Jim had 20, 30 years ago, are still buying a product from me, and they stay true and they believe in us. We're American made, better known, family run. I mean, it doesn't get any more true than this. You call our phone, you're talking to me. You email us, you talk to me or my mother-in-law. I mean, I just love it. I love the freedom. Every time I go to work, I'm not talking about selling pencils. I mean, I'm selling hunting equipment, and I love hunting, and it's part of my life. And I want something that, I can hand down to my boys if it's something they're interested in. It's a good lifestyle, and I'm not looking to be big. I don't want to be the biggest. I want to be the best. So that's really my main goal. I've tried to keep up with the big guys, and they were like, what's the future? What are your goals? What are you doing? I'm not one to sit down on a piece of paper and write out my goals, my mission statement, all that happy, fun stuff. I just work hard, roll with the punches. I just get it done and build product that guys want to use because it may have a learning curve, but it's going to be the most versatile, strongest equipment you're going to use. Just my main motto: keep it simple, stupid. It shouldn't be complicated to climb a tree. It should be complicated to kill a deer. So if you're so focused on how am I climbing this tree and you're sweating mother effing, well, you're probably not going to kill many deer. So keep it simple.
That's my mistake.
Maybe. Well, you're from Maine. You don't really see deer that often,
I know we don't hunt in Maine, do we?
Yeah, no.
Oh, yeah, a bit of pleasure.
That was good.
Kind of pleasure.